Question 24, Honourable Member Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr President. I just wanted to remind you that the Minister for
Yes,
Cabinet
with the leave of the House, once you've asked the question with the leave of the Court, it will be answered by the Minister for Policy and Reform.
Agreed.
Once you've asked the question.
Beg leave to ask the Minister for Policy and Reform if he will make a statement about the planning and development of the 2021 census in its smart service framework context, the potential impact of delaying the 2021 census, and the scope, nature and methodology of any envisaged demographic micro-census.
Having judged the question is in the public interest, I seek the leave of the Court that be answered by Mr Harmer.
Agreed.
Mr Harmer.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you to the Court. As the Honourable Member will be aware, the 2021 census was included in Phase 1 of the Smart Services Framework alongside the electoral register and the jury list, as the census may in fact be the starting point for the two other services when talking about auto-populating the register and the jury list from which flows from this. Planning and development for the 2021 census was being undertaken jointly between the Economic Affairs and Government Technology Services, with a number of workshops being undertaken to understand how the principles and concepts within the Smart Services Framework could be brought into a census and to understand what scope existed for an administrative census compared with the traditional approach to asking everyone to provide their information to government. This relationship between Economic Affairs and Government Technology Services will continue going forward in relation to the census and Smart Service Framework. Mr President, in relation to the second point, the consideration of delaying the census was not made lightly. Government was aware of the issues relating to planning in terms of strategic planning across government and also to the strategic plan itself. However, at the time of consideration, the island was not in the excellent position it now finds itself, and the difficulties presented by restrictions that were placed at the time would have made undertaking an accurate census very challenging, and ultimately bad data would have been a worse trade-off than no new data for an extra 12 months. On the final point, Mr President, as honourable members may have seen through local media, our intention is now to run a full census and, as planned in April 2021, subject to any external factors forcing this not to happen. In short, however, a microcensus would be a sample-based survey of the island's population.
Supplementary, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr President. Great news that the census is now back on, hopefully on April the 18th is the original date. With hindsight, does the Minister regret that he answered Mr Collister that the census was at a very early stage in preparation when it was interrupted? Because in fact the census has been prepared as part of the Smart Service Framework since 2016-17, and the reports have been published and preparation has been made. So I welcome the news that the census is back on. Does the Minister agree that it's a vital part of Smart Service Framework? The second question is, the other information that was published yesterday as part of the budget was that the Smart Service Framework itself was delayed for a year, and another £248,000 have been saved. Is the Smart Service Framework now back on, given that the census is back on and given the legislation has moved forward at pace?
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President, and just trying to absorb all of those sort of multiple of supplementaries. In essence, we need to consider, obviously, in terms of the census and in terms of the ongoing information that we need as a nation. At that time, as I said, there was an effective lockdown, and because of the case of restrictions being in place, would have hampered any ability for the census to be taken accurately. And obviously we need to think about the information that would have been provided. So there's no regret in there. It's a very fast-moving situation. And obviously, following a review, it makes absolutely sense that we do continue with the census. Do I think that census is critical to the Smart Service Framework? I think it's very difficult in this sort of context to give the whole sort of complexity about the matter, but actually no, because Smart Service Framework is completely different. What we're really talking about is a digital strategy. And really, was there a lot of development? In that, I would say, again, no, we need to do a complete review. We need to actually understand, because we have 440 different applications across government, and currently what happens is we develop a new system, then another system, then another system, then another system. In my view, and having spoken to the head of the Government Technology Services, that isn't the best way forward. We do need a completely different way of developing. We need to be looking at the, if you like, the outcomes, and we need to deliver about the structure. So actually, from my initial look at it, no, I don't think it is anywhere near to what it should be and what it needs to be. And we're many years behind what I think we need to be as a government, as a nation. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Middle, Mr Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr President. I'd like to ask the Minister, would he agree that the census has really important implications, not just for planning, but for education, for health, for the provision of many public services? If we're to do this in a sensible way, it would be sensible to have the census results prior to the formation of the next programme of government by the next administration, which is likely to happen in the tail end of 2021. So can he give some comfort that that essential data will be to hand for the next administration? Otherwise, they'll be making decisions on the basis of very outdated information about our island.
Minister to reply.
Yes, I would, if we were much further forward than I thought we were. And I think what we've got to do is take where we are now, take the work that was done in the 2016 census, look at that, the way that was done. We're trying to move as quickly. The intent, you're absolutely right, we should have the information before the next programme for government. So certainly that will be another one of the many things that we need to do. But can I make promises? I absolutely can't, unfortunately. We need to work hard with what we've got. Thank you,
Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr President. I have a recollection that it's been traditional in the past to consult on the questions that are going to be asked at the census to ensure that they're relevant and that they're focused. I think something might have been done on this in 2016, but is this going to be done again before the census coming up? And have the findings of any consultation been published in the past?
Minister to reply.
Thank you. In terms of consultation, there will be some, obviously, consultation. I know there's some questions that are pertinent. Obviously, what we want to do is get the key information, and we will work to do that.
Final supplementary, Mr Thomas.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I think it would be quite helpful, given what the ministers have stated about how you can have a smart service framework offering personalised service when you don't have a database of people. So it would be quite interesting to know how now the smart service framework is going to develop without information from the electoral register and the census in terms of people. So will the Minister commit to provide, because that's a very important part of phase one, the new phase one, which doesn't actually have a database of people inside it. And the second question for the census, along the lines that Mr Speaker's just asked, interestingly, when the private housing condition survey was published, the percentage estimate of vacant properties is 1/6 of what it was at the census time. So can the Minister actually, to help planning process and to help the government planning process beyond the town and country planning process, commit to actually share with members how they plan to estimate the vacant properties, so we have an indicator that's more close to what seems to be the reality in terms of vacant
Minister
properties?
to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. Obviously, we'll work with the questions, and I'm quite happy to work with the member on in terms of vacant households and refining the census to do that. Obviously, as I said, I indicated yesterday, it may well be the last sort of census of this type that we do. That's certainly mooted elsewhere, and it's about information gathering and having good information. On the other aspect, I think there's complete misunderstanding. It's not one big database with systems connecting to it. It's actually providing a whole platform and platform of framework, and actually developing and redesigning the whole way we do things. At the moment, it's just, as I said, 440 different systems that all are spurious, that may or may not talk to each other, with may be databases in different places. So unless you have a completely different way of looking at it, you're just going to get the same answers. So with that, I'll finish. Thank you, Mr. President.